let's talk about the Champions League. Sam, how are we planning on doing this? Are you going to give us a full rundown of every team left in the Champions League?
I'm going to rank the last 8 teams based on how likely I think they are to win the Champions League. So with the bracket in play now, I love the bracket. It's just such a godsend. We're actually able to do this properly. We're actually able to basically plot out the routes and take a look at who will face who and who potentially will face who later on. So used to be that we were just like shooting in the dark, right? This would probably be more weighted towards the idea of the overall strongest team because you still don't know who's going to face who in the final 4. But now we know exactly what's happening. We've taken our lead, haven't we, Dean, from March Madness, from the bracket, from a bit of college basketball. So I'll start at 8. And at 8, obviously, what that means is this team, in my opinion, is the least likely of the remaining teams to win the Champions League. And I'm going to put Inter.
Good. I had them at 8 too.
Okay, good. That's good. I'm off to a good start here.
Yeah.
They've got a really bad.
I had Anderlecht at 8. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Sorry.
No, different. Wait half an hour. They've got a really bad matchup, I think. Really bad matchup. And they are, if not the worst team left in the competition, then one of the worst. So you sort of mix it together. And I think 8th is about right for them. I do accept that they're a better cup team than the league team this season. They've been much better in knockout competition. But watching them genuinely like scrape by Porto, and I really mean that, they scraped by it. I just don't really have a lot of faith that Inter can put together a run here where they can upset multiple teams and go ahead and reach the final and win it. So I'm going to pop them down at 8. I just don't. I think they've got the least likely chance here of negotiating 5 incredibly difficult games with the squad they've got and with the season they've had.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that Benfica, I think, will just be really optimistic and confident about this matchup. The form that they've been in, the results they've been able to pull off so far, the manner of them, the players that they've got in good form at the moment. It's not that Inter can't win this game, obviously. Like, you've got to choose someone to go in at 8, and it's just that there's not a lot of reason to trust Inter Milan in this double header. I think that's ultimately, for me, what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to jump on the toes of where Benfica are going to end up in this list, but I'd completely agree. And it's a funny one, isn't it, this? Because there are sides who you would say are more traditionally powerhouses in this competition than Benfica, obviously, who have been on that dreadful run without winning anything since the curse was put on the club by Bayer Gutmann. But equally, I think you have to consider the form that teams have been in this season. And actually, Inter's form of late been pretty dreadful. And you look at it, obviously, they have a Coppa Italia game tonight against Juventus as we're recording this. They might turn around and win 4-0, and we're going to look a bit silly. But I think actually you look at their last couple of games. They lost to Fiorentina at the weekend. They lost to Juve the weekend before that. They drew 0-0 with Porto, which was the result that got them through. But they were very much, lucky is probably the wrong word, but it was very much a finish that could have gone either way. They lost to Spezia before that. Yes, they beat Lecce, but they lost to Bologna before that. It does feel like they're in a real funk at the moment. And I think that's the difference. And yes, they have 2 games here. Obviously, the Coppa semi today at Juventus, and then they've got a game away at Salernitana at the weekend. But I just don't know if there's enough time to turn that slump of form around before they have to go to Lisbon, and I think that's going to be a horrendous game for them in Lisbon.
Yeah, I was trying to balance this up, and I was like, "Oh, Inter, that's a tough draw. That is. Benfica's a tough draw." I was like, "Okay, well, if Benfica's a tough draw, what does a good draw look like for Inter of those remaining 7 teams?" And the answer is there isn't a single one out there that's a good draw for them, and that's kind of when you try and weigh this up and you try to separate the teams. Maybe, but.
That was the game I could see them winning, but Chelsea now have a new manager bounce, or will have a new manager bounce.
Maybe, might have. We'll get to that momentarily. But with Inter, it's like, well, they at least they avoided the other side of the draw, the tough side of the draw. It's like, well, okay, well, on this side of the draw, they've got Napoli, who are just clearly better than them. The league form will show you that. Okay, would you rather have 2 games against Benfica or 2 games against your city rivals in like the most intense scenario ever? It's like, well, there isn't a scenario here where I'm looking at Inter and thinking, you're the favourites here. So in the end, I put them 8th. And look, you mentioned Chelsea. I put them 7th. And I think for some people would say, well, they should be 8th. They don't even have a manager. We'd have no idea what their situation is going to be. And I don't know if that element of unknown is can be remotely spun as positive. Some people may try to do so, but I don't think I can say that. We don't know who the manager is going to be by the time they take on Real Madrid. I'm honestly unconvinced that even matters. I don't think a new manager can really turn this team around and get them into a sort of shape that can beat Real Madrid over 2 legs particularly quickly. They'd have to remind the entire team how to score a goal within about a week, which I believe would be tough. And that you guys, you've been protecting yourselves emotionally a little bit over the last month or so. You've been sort of half joking that Chelsea, this is exactly the kind of season where Chelsea go ahead and win the Champions League. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And the reason I've got them above Inter, despite also having a horrible matchup, but also lacking a manager, is because Chelsea are the kind of team that there is that 5% chance that they might just go and do it. Whereas I don't really have that kind of like X factor allocation for Inter. But surely not. For
Surely
Chelsea.
not.
Surely with Real Madrid, surely not.
Yeah, I mean, this is the reason that you probably could put them in at 8. It's the pathway to actually getting to the final for Chelsea. It's Real Madrid, and then it's Bayern Munich.
Or
That
City.
is, or City, yeah. But whichever. It's that's as hard as it gets. It really is as hard as it gets to get to the final and then to win the final. So that would be a good argument, to be fair, because Inter Milan fans would be saying, hang on, you can't put us at 8. We're playing Benfica. Like, of course we can beat Benfica and actually get to the semi-final, and then also got a very winnable semi-final potentially, against an Italian rival. So there's that too. And that's fair. That's absolutely fair. So I think it's worth addressing that. It's very much an unknown, Chelsea, of what we're going to get here. We really don't know, do we?
I think my take on it is that even though this is a more difficult draw, I actually think it's one. And I was talking to my friend Max about this, who's a big Chelsea fan. We were talking about the fact that if Chelsea got Benfica, I'd have them 8th. The fact that they've got Real Madrid, and this sounds ridiculous, it sounds like complete reverse logic. The fact that they've got a bigger, more obviously powerhouse team in this quarterfinal, I think in some ways plays into Chelsea's hands, because actually a game where they're seen as complete underdogs, no chance they'll go through, is probably a little bit more Chelsea than a game where they're expected to beat a team who are flying, who are in form, who people won't give the respect they perhaps deserve because they're aside from the Primeda, rather than Real Madrid, who Chelsea will go, this is a massive game, we're going to get up for this, the crowd, etc., etc. So I don't think, that's not to say that they're likely to win this game, but I think that Chelsea are more likely to beat a Real Madrid than they are to beat a Benfica, and that sounds nuts.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is backwards logic, but I do understand your point. And I guess the way I would frame the same point is that, like, I think Chelsea just have there's a 5% chance that they have the players here and the luck and the run and the X factor to go ahead and topple a few teams and somehow do it. Whereas I just do not believe that Inter have it in them to go all the way, even if like they get all the lucky bounces and rubs of the green. There is a small possibility that Chelsea can do this. I just don't see it with Inter. So even though they're on the tougher side of the draw, I still put them slightly above them. Bear in mind, ranked 7th and 8th, you ain't winning this tournament.
Okay, who's at 6 then?
Okay, so at 6 is AC Milan. This feels a bit weird because it means that I have placed them below a team that they are going to face, and they literally just beat that same team 4-0.
Away.
And so you sort of faced with the task of like deciding how much to draw and extract from that game. Like, is it a signal? Is it a reckoning? Does this mean that AC Milan are back? Do they have the upper hand confidence-wise on Napoli? Or should you probably look to the season's body of evidence and weight that much more heavily? And so I've kind of gone with the latter. I've kind of gone with, well, Napoli have been significantly better than AC Milan for the entire season. They were lacking Victor Osimhen for the game at the weekend, in which they lost 4-0, and they'll hope that he can be available. Do you have faith that Milan over 2 legs can go ahead and produce performances like that against Napoli again? Can they do it? Like, genuinely, can they do it? And some of the most diehard Milan fans will tell me, yes, we've got a good coach. He's defensively minded. He can manage tournament and knockout football very well. And we have 2 or 3 players here who can score outrageous goals if we need them to make the difference when the margins are very fine. And I'm with you. And that's why, I think there's a separate tier here. We put Chelsea, we put Inter here at the bottom, and then we enter another tier with AC Milan. But I think I've got to say Napoli here. I've got to say that Napoli will come out better off than AC Milan. And so I've put Napoli 5th to rope in the 2. Basically, I'm saying that weekend's result is not representative of where this tie lies.
Okay. I think something's really interesting. Do you know that the team who's played at home has not won a tie between Napoli and AC Milan for the last 9 games? Yes. So Napoli won at San Siro, obviously, earlier this year. Now Milan have gone to Naples and won at the Maradona. In the last 9 games, the away team has either won or it's been a draw. So there's that to consider. It's a bit of one of those weird records. And the first leg's at San Siro. So does that record persist? And if it does persist, can Napoli rack up a lead that will allow them to play? I think the interesting thing with Napoli is that when they do, they can kind of play in both ways. And I think the weekend, as you say, Sam, was an aberration, not a moment in Napoli's season. And obviously, without Osimhen, you can't blame a 4-0 loss on the lack of a striker, even if that striker is winning the Capocannoniere hunt by a mile. You can't do that. But I do think that the way that Milan were able to step out from the back, the way they were able to pressure, the fact that they were able to get the fullbacks forward, moving on, is all part of the fact that you don't have to worry quite as much when Osimhen isn't there, where it almost takes a full defensive line to contain him. And so I wonder about that. I wonder that with him back, are Milan just forced to play in a slightly more defensive way? I also think there's an element of Milan would have gone to Naples on the weekend and they would have seen all these badges, all the 3s, all the Scudetto things, and gone, hang on, not done yet. You're not champions yet. Just that little bit of pressure. And even Maldini came out and talked about anxiety within the camp at Milan, and Rafael Leao posted on Twitter saying l'ansia, which basically just means anxiety, with a picture of him celebrating. And you're like, okay, cool. Everyone's clapping at each other. I'm okay with this. It's quite fun. I think Milan were just like, hang on, we ain't gone anywhere. But I also think that the fact that they went back to a 4 at the back probably surprised Napoli a little bit. I wonder if should they have held that in reserve for these games where it's a stun and win. I don't know, but
I was joking with you guys, wasn't I? Off the back of the result, Dean texted us on Sunday night. Oh my God, Milan are wiping the floor with Napoli. That's the worst mistake they can make. Napoli here playing the long game. They've gone weaker. They're playing 4D chess here. Lose this one, win in the Champions League, still win a Scudetto. I mean, that's kind of. I'm joking, obviously, but
yeah.
I'm like half convinced that like this was bad for Milan. Genuinely, like they've annoyed Napoli. They've pissed them off. And now they've got to go and play them twice again.
They poked the hornet's nest.
Yeah.
I quite fancy Milan to win the first leg, though. Like I do, especially if Osimhen isn't back in time. We'll see. Like, I imagine Napoli won't play him at the weekend anyway, even if he's starting to come back to fit. I think they've got Lecce, so shouldn't need him for that game. So then they'll give him a week's rest, another week from here. Look, Osimhen saying, "Don't worry, it's only a small thing. I won't be long." But the initial reports, I think I saw a Nigerian journalist saying three weeks. We should leave it fine for him to make that first leg. So I'm skeptical about him being back for that. And if he's not, then I think AC Milan will have to obviously make the most of this opportunity to take a lead into that second leg, despite what Jack says about them. The home team having no chance in this game. They're gonna
famously. That's what I said. Yeah,
they're gonna have to. They're gonna have to hold a lead because you're right. But like when they go to Napoli, to Naples, they're gonna be on a revenge mission. Like that's an embarrassment. Like whether it matters or not in the context of their league campaign doesn't matter. they were absolutely battered. And it was like, you could see the tension, there's arguments going on all over the place. Like, it hurts when you get a beating like that. But Milan have to use that and be like, we're not just going to do it once, we're going to do it again. You think that was bad? Wait till you see what's coming next. You think you're the kings of Italy now because you're top of the league. No, you're not. Like, we're the reigning champions and we're going to go and win the Champions League now. And this is a big thing for it, like for Milan to even be at this stage again. It's been a long time coming for Milan to get back to being on this sort of stage. And now that they're there, this is a big test. Look, it hasn't been that convincing so far in the Champions League. If you think back to like the Tottenham game and things like that, there's been very fine margins, and even in the group stages, there were a couple of hairy moments in there. But this is just a matchup with domestic rivals, and then it's a good semi-final that they could then go into, which would be winnable. So, yeah, let's see. I think AC Milan might win it, but it's just a hunch.
I mean, look, I think actually moving on slightly from this, or maybe going a bit more forward looking, and Jack particularly interested here. I think if you and I agree that Napoli should be placed above Milan in this ranking, do you agree with me that Napoli are as low as fifth?
No, I don't know. I would have had them ahead of Benfica at fourth in the minimum. To be honest, though, I think that on this season's body of evidence, Napoli should be considered favourites to win the Champions League because I think they've been the best team in Europe this season. But I do appreciate that that's not all there is to it. I appreciate that they're in the quarterfinals for the first time in their history. It'd be so rare for a team to come into that situation and then go and win the tournament. It's not something we've really seen in the Champions League. And I think that there are sides with more pedigree at this element of a tournament. But I think based on who has been the best side in Europe this season, the answer is Napoli, isn't it?
Probably, yes. Of course, as you're right in saying that it doesn't necessarily work like that. And I think the pedigree point you make is very important because it almost takes a certain amount of like comfort at this level and understanding at this level to be able to genuinely get over the line. And I think it's something that Manchester City found very, very difficult for like a number of years. And still last season, in incredible circumstances, managed to fall foul of it. And that pedigree needs to be taken into account at this level. And Napoli, as a result of just not reaching the stage for a long time, well, ever in the Champions League era, but a long time in European Cup era, it's difficult. It's uncharted territory. It's the same argument that we've really made a lot of the time for Arsenal winning the league. It's like you almost have to believe it to see it. And I said the same about Napoli, winning the league. That's going to happen, and I'll continue to underestimate them, probably to my own detriment. But at 4, I've put Benfica, which is another symbol of something. It means that basically I think that should Benfica and Napoli meet in the semi-final, which I think they will, I think Benfica will win. I think they'll beat Napoli. I think their style of play will trump Napoli's. I think they'll just be a really, really difficult customer for them. And it's really hard to say whether or not that's logical or not. It has to be kind of like a gut feeling. But Benfica feel like more of a giant killer this season, or this in the sharp end of this tournament, than Napoli.
Okay, yeah, I can accept that.
Yeah,
I can accept that completely. I think I can completely get the argument, and I also think that there's an element of it. But I just think if both semi-finals, if both quarterfinals were to go to form, if you will, especially with what we talked about in this side of the bracket. So if Napoli were to beat Milan and Benfica were to beat Inter, I would expect Napoli to beat Benfica.
Okay.
So therefore, I would have them above them.
Yeah.
But I do understand what you're saying about Joe. I think that Benfica are more likely to get through their quarter than Napoli are, if you will, if we're looking at percentages. So I think that, Benfica probably around 75%, I reckon, to qualify from where I'm sitting against Inter. I think Napoli are probably about 60-40 against Milan. But if Benfica and Napoli came up against each other, I'd swing it 60-40 to Napoli. So that's, work on that if you will.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the bracketology and the predictions, right? It's good fun, actually, thinking about it in those senses. But yeah, not only do I have Benfica as a stronger candidate to reach the semis anyway, I think they might topple Napoli if they meet them. So I ultimately believe that Benfica are going to reach the Champions League final. The problem for them is that they're only 4th, which kind of leads us back over to the stronger side of the bracket, in quotes, because the only team that we've talked about from that side so far is Chelsea, who don't have a manager. So this is where we start to get to the serious big guns. And as much as we like, fresh faces and fresh stories, that pedigree point you made is really important. And we're going to be talking about 3 teams here now who are consistently right at the sharp end of this tournament. Champions League finals and semi-finals between them shared aplenty. But at 3, and this is the start of basically a separate tier, I am going to go for Jack's favourites for the Champions League, Manchester City. I've got a bad feeling about them, as in for them, because I'm actually very ready to see this team win a Champions League. I really want Pep Guardiola to win another one, so a lot of people will just shut up. I really want to see Jack Grealish and Kevin De Bruyne and the whole English contingent really win a Champions League, because that's great for English football. So I will support them in that sense. But I've got a bit of a bad feeling. I'm just not quite sure. And one thing that's really shaken me is the managerial developments in the last week or so, because they've got to play Bayern Munich, and Thomas Tuchel has been a really tricky customer for Pep Guardiola in recent history. And it's something that Manuel on last week's podcast mentioned very briefly towards the end when he was wrapping up on the Bayern Munich discussion talking about Tuchel, and it triggered something in my brain. Tuchel gives Pep real problems. His Chelsea side were really difficult for Pep to interpret. And of course, he beat them in the Champions League final in 2021. So I sort of stuck on that a little bit. And then, of course, if they were to get past that ridiculously difficult tie, it's probably Real Madrid next, who they just crapped the bed with last season in the most ridiculous circumstances. So, this 4-game gauntlet potentially is just horrendous. And even if they make it through, they've still got to play a final. So for City, I feel like there's a couple of things that are just bugging me here. I want them to succeed, but I'm not convinced they can get past all of these obstacles.
You can't trust them, can you? Ultimately, it comes down to that. You have no trust in them because you can't. You don't know what you're getting. You might get an unbelievable.
More,
They've just absolutely blitzed Liverpool, right? They've produced one of the best performances. So if you were ever going to be high on Man City to win the Champions League, it should be right now. And you're still unconvinced. So I think that tells you everything about the doubts that are in our minds. There's no doubt either that the players will have a nagging feeling in their minds when it comes to certain aspects of the competition and the 5 games that they would have to play between now and then to actually win the Champions League. 5 matches of the highest level football to win this trophy. Look, should they be capable of it? Absolutely, no doubt about it. On paper, they should be able to do this. And that's not it. It's that mental aspect of the game that I'm just not convinced the players have got. And for Pep, look, let's see. I mean, unfortunately for him, the thing that everyone keeps throwing at him about overthinking things keeps being proved true. And what happened last season was a disaster. So I absolutely can't trust them. I think they're a brilliant team. There's still a possibility they win the Premier League, to be fair. If Arsenal do slip up, if they can beat Arsenal in the Premier League, they can still actually win that competition. But winning the Champions League, oh no, I just can't see them actually beating Bayern Munich. I really can't.
Look, Bayern were good at the weekend, right? But only after Dortmund collapsed. It's really important to remember that
after they collapsed, they went 4-0 up. Bayern, how's that?
And they collapsed very early. It was like 15.
They collapsed
for 15 minutes. Well, I think it was actually 13. Dortmund played with a real swagger, a confidence that I think minutes. Man City will play with until I don't think. Okay, all right. Can you see Edison miss kicking a clearance into his own net? Because I can't, for what it's worth. Just so we're all clear on that.
I don't think that's the only way Bayern are going to go 1-0 up, though.
They're allowed to score in other ways.
I just think that Dortmund played with a real swagger and exuberance. I think City will play with it. And for 10 minutes, Bayern were like, whoa, what's this? And I appreciate that Tuchel's only had a couple of days in there. I think Freiburg at the weekend will prove a sterner test of what actually Bayern are capable of at this point under Tuchel. And I'll be very, very interested to see how that one plays out, because we know what Borussia Dortmund are like at the Allianz. And as soon as they kind of woke up and realized what the occasion was, they collapsed. They completely and utterly imploded. I don't think Bayern needed to do very much to be impressive in that game. They didn't go and batter Dortmund. Dortmund battered themselves. Bayern just picked up the pieces and put them in the back of the net. It felt like one of those performances where you're like, there would have been Bayern fans there going, how are we 4-0 up? We haven't done anything. And I think that's the kind of the point you're looking at this way. It's really easy to look at that and be like, wow, Tuchel, one game, Bayern are back. But I don't think that's how it played out from what I watched. And that's everyone can see these games differently. But I think that when you watch what Man City did to Liverpool at the weekend against a team that, yes, caused them problems on the break here and there, and I think Bayern will do the same, but mostly they were able to deal with it, to soak it up, to put that extra man into midfield, to the fact that Stones played in midfield, not a right back, because they had so much of the ball and so much of the pressure. I think they will suffocate teams. And I think they are ready, especially if Erling Haaland is back, to punish sides this year. And I think that City are a better side than what you're giving them credit for here.
But you're also kind of forgetting, like, Bayern, when under Nagelsmann, who's apparently not that good, beat PSG. It's knocked them out of the Champions League.
Bayern were excellent in the Champions League under Nagelsmann.
So,
I don't think anyone's
excellent under Nagelsmann.
that.
Imagine how good they're going to be under Tuchel.
Like,
this team's about to lift up another level. They're going to lift up another level. They've also got João Cancelo. They've got a spy in the camp. They got someone who understands every single element as to how that Man City team is going to function. He might not even play in the actual game. It doesn't matter. He will be the most important member that Tuchel is going to rely on in the build-up to that fixture to say, right, what will their plans be if we do this? What would they do what would they be expecting you to do in this situation? And he knows all the answers. There's not many people that actually know what Pep Guardiola is going to be planning. João Cancelo does. So look, I just think there's too many caveats here. Even beyond like the pedigree and the mind games that come into it that tell me that Bayern are going to edge this game. Look, happy to be proved wrong, definitely, because we want an English team to progress. But I just give him Bayern this all day long.
Well, look, here's a question for you then. Do you think that I've got Real Madrid at 2 or Bayern Munich at 2?
If you're sensible, you always rate Real Madrid to win the Champions League. So hopefully you've got Bayern Munich at 2 and Real Madrid at 1.
I think you are a more sensible human being than that, Sam. So I think you'll have Real Madrid at 2 because I think you think if Bayern are going to beat City, then they're going to win the Champions League.
Jack is correct. I have Real Madrid in second place and Bayern Munich in first. So
you've gone with logic, and there's no logic when Real Madrid are involved. So
that is true, and it's a fair point.
Very true. So not to disturb the ranking, but since we're on Bayern, I'll just tell you what I think about. And my rationale for this was that basically with the new manager element, with Thomas Tuchel coming in, it's kind of like a gamble either way. Like wherever you put Bayern in this list feels like a bit of a gamble because there's this new element to it that you're just not really sure how it's going to play out. And so what I did was I just thought, well, right, let's pretend they had the same manager. Let's pretend Nagelsmann was still involved. How would I rank this list? And I had Bayern top because for me, they have been the best team in the Champions League this season. Like they've won 8 games. They've beaten Barcelona twice, Inter twice, PSG twice. They've only conceded 2 goals and they were to Victoria Plzeňa. Like it was like they've been crazy good.
What a random statistic as well.
It's so stupid, but they have been unbelievable. And like when you watch their games, particularly the ones against Barcelona, like the speed and the strength and the aggression and the tactical acumen and then adding in like the technical ability, they are unbelievable. And in big games, they really, really show up. This midfield is outrageously good. They're so good. And if Leroy Sané is going to play like he did at the weekend, then they get even better. Now, what I had to ask myself was, okay, so if you had Bayern top originally, do they get better or worse or stay the same with Thomas Tuchel in charge? And as long as the answer isn't they get worse, why move them? Why change my theory from what I think has been the best team in the Champions League this season? So that is how I ended up with Bayern retaining top spot. And that is how I ended up slotting Real Madrid in second place. And a lot of the things I've just said about Bayern Munich apply to them too, right? They have a perfect big game setup. They have a perfect big game mentality. I think they're probably weaker than City on paper, but football's not played on paper. So if they were to meet them, I think they'd probably beat them again. So that's how City end up in third on my list. Madrid end up in second, but Bayern trump them all.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a fair shout. I mean, Dean, do you want to give the counter punch?
No, I don't really have an actual defense of Real Madrid and to why they would win this, apart from the fact that they just do. Like that's
It's lads, it's Madrid, but it's the good version.
that unfortunately, like there's no
It's the
point in any
opposite.
deep. There's no point in any deep analysis on this because we all know the reason that Real Madrid might win the Champions League is just because it's the next part of their name, Real Madrid Champions League winners. Like that's kind of what comes next. They won it last year, so I guess there is decreased chance that they do it again. But I do expect them to get past Chelsea.
They've had a couple. Yeah, they've had a couple of back-to-backs.
Yeah, no, they have done back-to-backs, but those teams would tend to be better than this one probably. Then there's the Ancelotti factor, I guess. You know, he sounds like his job might be on the line here. I mean, whether or not he particularly cares, I'm not sure at this point of his career. But you know, if he was to go on,
so amusing. It's just like I've done that now. It's okay. I might just get a new challenge. I think Brazil want me. It's all good.
I think Brazil want me next, so I won't worry too much. I can take the biggest international job in the world. But so yeah, I don't know. And then you think, well, what if Ancelotti just wins the Champions League and then leaves to go off to Brazil? Like, there's that element to it too. Either way, it might be that this is his last season for sure. I just back Real Madrid. You know that.
I don't blame you.
I think it's completely fair. I think it's a completely fair position to take. I'm just going to have to try and logic.
Yeah, you won't get reasoning from me, Jack. You won't get reasoning from me.
No. That's fine. I mean, what is? Have you got an 8, Dean? Have you got your 8-1?
I didn't have it like strict out. I just like have it in my head. I was just like Inter Milan were definitely my 8. To be fair, it might have actually been Benfica at 7. If that makes any sense in terms of winning it, I still don't think Benfica have got.
Well, unless the curse is broken, I suppose it's completely fair. Unless the curse is broken, you may as well put Benfica at 8.
Yeah, this is the thing.
You know, Bayer Gutmann is still up there. What was it? 100 years, he said. If Eusebio praying his grave couldn't break that curse, then I don't know what can.
Exactly. So honestly, if we're properly thinking about this, then Benfica are not going to win the Champions League. It's very highly unlikely. So I probably, to be honest, would have gone Benfica then at 7 and then tops it up from there. Chelsea I'd have found hard to place if I was doing the actual ranking because, well, it's an unknown. There's an untold factor here as well. We don't actually know when they're going to bring in a new manager. There's some people I speak to
or
say
who it will be.
Oh, well, they'll probably wait till the summer now. But can they wait? This guy that they got in charge,
Brighton Bruno, taking them to the Champions League.
Brighton Bruno is in charge as we're recording right now. It's obviously Tuesday, so Chelsea play tonight. And the story is tonight he's picking a team for the first time in his life.
Yeah. It's great vibe.
So that's how bad Graham Potter was. They're trusting a guy who's never picked a football team before to lead them into the home stretch of the season and into the Champions League latter stages.
They're going to bring Lampard back for the end of the season, aren't they?
I don't know what's going to happen, but I find it hard to believe that you could actually get to a Champions League final with Bruno in charge. But look, as we've said before, like they've done it before with interims, and you never know.
Can I just bring it back to the main point there, which was it doesn't matter what Chelsea do because they've got Real Madrid, who are your favourites. So you can't put Chelsea very high at all.
But if they did beat Real Madrid, then they win it. So that's hard to place, isn't it?
This is the whole Napoli dilemma.
That's hard to
Napoli
place.
dilemma from before. Yeah. I think just for posterity, my 8 would have been Inter 8, Chelsea at 7, Milan at 6, Benfica at 5, Real Madrid at 4, Napoli at 3, Bayern at 2, City at 1. That would have been my 8.